The elderly woman was deceived when buying a house, never imagining the treasure she had there. Dorothy Wilson never imagined that her 70 years of honest life would culminate in that moment of despair. Her life savings had vanished into the hands of a man in an impeccable suit and seductive words, and now she was there, facing a nightmare that materialized in crumbling bricks and tall weeds. When the broker Richard Blackwell showed her the photos of the property, they were images of a charming house in the countryside of Vermont, with a wide porch and a flower garden. He had guaranteed it would be the perfect refuge for her retirement years. But as she got off the bus on that hot March afternoon, what Dorothy found was a ruined building, with the roof partially collapsed and vegetation invading every corner. Her legs trembled. The address was correct, but the house was not. The tears came before she could hold them back. She tried calling Richard one more time, but the number that once answered promptly now went straight to voicemail. She was alone, over 200 miles from New York City, where she had sold her small apartment to fulfill that dream. Dorothy pulled her wheeled suitcase over the uneven ground, each jolt tearing away another piece of her hope. The rotten wooden gate creaked as she pushed it open. She observed the facade with details the photos hadn't shown: windows without glass, warped doors, walls with deep cracks. How could she have been so naive? Her daughter Emily had always warned about scams targeting the elderly, but Dorothy considered herself too smart to fall into traps. Now, with the sun beginning to set on the horizon, she needed to make a decision. She had no money for a hotel, nor the strength to return immediately to New York City and face her daughter's pitying look. She took a deep breath and entered the house. The smell of mold and damp earth filled her nostrils. There was an old sofa covered with a dusty sheet, a wooden table with only 2 steady legs, and remnants of abandoned life scattered across the floor. Dorothy wiped her tears with the back of her hand and decided she would spend at least that night there. In the morning she would think of something. She found a broom leaning in a corner and began to sweep, more out of a need to occupy her mind than from any hope of making the place habitable. Every movement raised clouds of dust that danced in the sunbeams, coming through the cracks in the roof. She worked until nightfall, creating a small, clean space where she could at least sit. When darkness took over the house, Dorothy lit a candle she carried in her bag. The faint light played with the shadows on the peeling walls. That's when she heard it. A creak coming from above, then another. Her heartbeat quickened. It could be rats, she thought, trying to calm herself. But the sound was too heavy. They were footsteps. Dorothy grabbed the broom as a weapon and looked up at the ceiling. There was a trapdoor she hadn't noticed before, partially hidden by a fallen beam. The footsteps stopped. Everything fell silent, except for the pounding of her own heart. She waited. Nothing happened for long minutes. Maybe it was just the old wood settling, she tried to convince herself. But then the trapdoor moved. Just an inch, but enough for her to be sure. There was someone up there. Panic made her back up against the wall. Her mind raced between screaming, running, or confronting whoever was there. Before she could decide, the trapdoor opened completely, and a wooden ladder slowly descended. Dorothy raised the broom, ready to defend herself. A pair of boots appeared first, then legs in pants dirty with soil. When the man came down completely, she could see him in the flickering candlelight. He must have been about 40 years old, unshaven, wearing a worn work shirt and holding a straw hat in his hands. His eyes showed as much fright as hers. They stared at each other for seconds that felt eternal. The man raised his hands in a peace gesture. His voice came out hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken in a long time. "Please don't scream. I won't do anything. I was just living here." Dorothy kept the broom raised, but her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Who are you? This is my house." The man took a step back, still with his hands raised. "My apologies, ma'am. I didn't know someone had bought the place. It's been months since anyone showed up here." "Months? You've been living in my attic for months?" He lowered his gaze, ashamed. "I had no choice. My name is Michael Carpenter. I lost everything and needed a place to stay." Dorothy processed the information. Her initial anger began giving way to curiosity. The man didn't seem dangerous, just desperate. She slowly lowered the broom but kept her distance. "What do you mean you lost everything?" Michael sighed and leaned against the wall as if the weight of his own story was pushing him down. "I had a small business, carpentry. The debts grew, I couldn't pay the suppliers. When they foreclosed, they came after me. My house, my car, everything's gone. I needed to disappear for a while, let the dust settle." "And you chose the attic of an abandoned house." "I thought it was truly abandoned. Look at the state of this place." Dorothy felt a lump in her throat. She too was lost, deceived, with nowhere to go. It was like looking in a time-distorted mirror and seeing her own situation. "I was deceived," she said, her voice breaking. "A realtor sold me this house with fake photos. I spent all my savings, everything I saved in 50 years of work. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out." Now continuing, Michael watched the woman before him. Even in the faint candlelight, he could see the marks of a hard-lived life on her face, and now the glimmer of tears in her eyes. A feeling of guilt struck him. He was invading the only thing she had left. "Mom, I'll leave. I don't want to cause more trouble. You've already been through too much." But Dorothy raised her hand, making him stop. "Wait. Where will you go?" "I don't know. I'll find somewhere. I always have." She looked around at the house that was hers, but seemed to belong to no one. An idea began forming in her mind, still hazy but persistent. "You said you were a carpenter." "I am. I mean, I was. I still have my hands for work." "This house needs many repairs." Michael looked at her uncertainly. "Are you offering me work?" "I'm saying that if you help make this place livable, you can stay in the attic until you resolve your situation. But I want to be clear. I have no money to pay. It would be an exchange. Your work for a roof." The man blinked several times as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then a tired smile appeared on his face. "You don't even know me. Why would you trust me?" Dorothy thought about the question. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps she recognized in Michael the same feeling of being adrift that she felt. Either way, alone she wouldn't be able to do anything with that house. "Because neither of us has anything left to lose, and because I need to believe there are still honest people in this world, even after being deceived." The night advanced with the two sitting on the floor of that destroyed living room, sharing stories of how they'd ended up there. Michael told about the carpentry shop that was his father's legacy, how he tried to keep it alive even with the tough economy, and how everything collapsed when a large order was cancelled at the last minute, leaving him full of purchased materials and no way to pay. Dorothy, in turn, spoke about her years as a seamstress, how she raised her daughter alone after her husband left them, and how she had dreamed of a peaceful old age in the countryside. Richard Blackwell had been so convincing, with his expensive suits and golden promises. He swore that the house was a bargain, that the previous owner had left in a hurry and wanted a quick sale. The photos were beautiful. The documents looked legitimate. How could she have known it was all fake? "This Richard," Michael interrupted her thoughts. "What was he like? Do you remember any details?" Dorothy closed her eyes, bringing the man's image to memory. Tall, well-dressed, had a gold ring on his pinky finger. He spoke very well with that polite way that makes you trust him. "Why?" "Just curious. It's just that this kind of scam isn't uncommon. I know other people who were tricked in a similar way." "Other people? Here in the area?" Michael nodded slowly. "When you live in the shadows like I do, you hear stories. Mrs. Gladys, who lives about 2 kilometers from here, once mentioned a neighbor who bought a piece of land that didn't exist. And there's an old man in the village who lost his pension money on a house that already had a real owner." Dorothy's blood ran cold. It wasn't just her. There were more victims, more elderly people being deceived by unscrupulous men like Richard. "We need to do something." "Ma'am, I can't even show my face much. Remember, there are people looking for me." "But I can. I can look for these people, hear their stories." Michael shook his head with concern. "And what will you do with that? These scammers are clever. They know how to cover their tracks. Then we'll figure out how to dig them up." The determination in Dorothy's voice surprised even herself. Just a few hours ago, she was falling apart, defeated. Now, the idea that she wasn't alone in her suffering ignited something inside her. A productive anger, a purpose. The first rays of sunlight began to stream through the broken windows when they finally decided to rest. Michael returned to the attic, and Dorothy settled on the old sofa, covering herself with her own coat. It wasn't comfortable, but it was better than sleeping on the street, and for the first time since she got off that bus, she felt a spark of hope. The morning arrived hot and stuffy. Dorothy woke up with back pain and her body complaining about the poor night's sleep. Michael was already awake, examining the structure of the house with a professional eye. When she got off the sofa, he already had a mental list of priorities. First, we need to fix the roof before it rains. Then the windows, the doors. There's a lot to do, but if we work every day, in a few weeks this could be truly habitable. A few weeks? Dorothy swallowed hard. How would they survive until then? I have some tools hidden in the attic. I managed to save the basics before I lost everything. The problem is the materials. We need boards, nails, shingles. I don't have money to buy any of that. Michael scratched his beard, thoughtful. Maybe you won't need to. There's an abandoned construction materials depot about 5 kilometers from here. The owner went bankrupt years ago and left a lot of stuff behind. People in the area take what they need. I can go get some things. While Michael set off in search of materials, Dorothy decided to explore the property more thoroughly. In the daylight, she could see more details. The land was spacious, with several abandoned fruit trees, an old well, and what seemed to have been a vegetable garden. Behind the house was a smaller structure, perhaps an old chicken coop or storage shed. She walked over there, carefully pushing aside the overgrowth. The door was locked with a rusty padlock. Dorothy looked around and found a heavy rock. With 3 strong blows, the padlock gave way. Inside, she found old gardening tools, expired seed packets, and, curiously, a locked wooden box. Her heart raced. Could it be? She took the box outside and tried to open it, but the lock was jammed. She would need Michael's help. While waiting, she examined the box more closely. It was made of good quality wood with delicate carvings on the sides, a carpenter's work she recognized. Hours later, Michael returned carrying old but still useful planks, some nails, and even a few roof tiles. Dorothy rushed to meet him. I found something. A locked box in the back storage room. Michael's eyes sparkled with curiosity. He dropped the materials and went with her to where the box was. He examined it carefully, running his fingers over the carvings. Beautiful work. Whoever made this had talent. Can you open it? I can try without damaging the wood too much. Give me a minute. Dorothy watched as Michael took one of his tools and worked delicately on the lock. After a few minutes of trying, they heard a click. He looked at her. Want to do the honors? With trembling hands, Dorothy opened the lid. Inside were only old papers, yellowed with time. The disappointment was immediate. No gold, no money, just old documents. Michael, however, picked up one of the papers and began reading with growing attention. Mrs. Dorothy, look at this. These are deeds, property documents. For the house? Not just the house, for several plots of land in the region, all in the name of someone named Albert Thompson. Who is that? Must be the former owner. But look at the date on these documents. They're from 50, 60 years ago, and there's something else. He picked up another paper. A letter. Dorothy moved closer to read along. The handwriting was shaky, from someone elderly or ill. The letter said, To whoever finds this box, my name is Albert Thompson, and if you are reading this, it means I have passed on. I have no children or close relatives. These lands were my life, my work, my pride. But what good is land when you are alone? I leave everything to whoever has the courage to stay, to rebuild what time has destroyed. The deeds are yours now. Use them wisely. Do not make the mistake I made of loving things more than people. The silence that followed was profound. Dorothy reread the letter 3 times, unable to believe it. Michael checked the deeds one by one, his expression growing more serious with each document. Is this real? Her voice was barely a whisper. It seems so. They are official documents with seals and signatures. But I'll be honest, Mrs. Dorothy. This is complicated. Just because you found the documents doesn't mean they are automatically yours. But the letter is his will, but it needs to go through a legal process. And there's another problem. If these lands are worth what they seem to be worth, a lot of people will be interested, including that broker who deceived you. Dorothy sat on the grass, holding the letter to her chest. It was too much to process. An hour ago, she was picking up old roof tiles. Now she had in her hands documents that could change everything. What do I do, Michael? He knelt beside her, his face serious but kind. First, we hide these documents very well. Second, we don't tell anyone yet. Third, I need to find someone who understands property laws. But you said you can't show yourself too much. I can't, but I know someone who can help. A lawyer who was my friend before everything fell apart. He owes me a few favors. I can try to contact him without exposing myself too much. That night, after hiding the box under a loose floorboard in the attic, they sat down to plan the next steps. Michael explained that his lawyer friend, Andrew, was an expert in rural property issues and could guide them on how to proceed. But there was a problem. To make those deeds valid, they would need to prove Albert Thompson's intention to leave the lands to whoever occupied them. "Is the letter proof?" asked Dorothy. "That may be, but letters alone sometimes aren't enough in court. We need more. Witnesses who knew Albert, who can confirm he had no heirs and that he expressed this wish other times. And where do we find these people? We start with the closest neighbors, the Gladys I mentioned. She's lived here for decades. If anyone knew Albert, it's her." The next morning, Dorothy walked to the neighboring property, following Michael's instructions. Gladys's house was simple but well kept, with a flower garden in front. A woman with white hair and a bent back was watering the plants when Dorothy approached. "Good morning, Mum. My name is Dorothy. I just moved into the house next door." Gladys looked up, surprised and suspicious. "Albert's house? I thought it was abandoned." "It was. I bought it recently. Or at least I thought I had bought it." Gladys's face closed off. "Oh, I see. You're another one." "Another one?" "Of the deceived ones. This place has been sold at least 3 times in recent years, always the same scam. Handsome man, well-dressed, papers that look real." Dorothy's heart sank. "So I'm not the first?" "Far from it, my dear. 2 years ago, a retired couple showed up here thinking they had bought it. Before them, a widowed gentleman. They all lost money. They all left." "Why didn't anyone do anything?" Gladys sighed and gestured for Dorothy to sit on a wooden bench under a mango tree. "We did. We went to the police. We spoke with people from the city hall. But without concrete evidence, without being able to find these scammers, it came to nothing. They use fake names, forged documents. They disappear before anyone can react." Dorothy felt the anger grow again in her chest. How many lives had been destroyed like this? How many dreams stolen? "Did you know Albert Thompson, the former owner?" Gladys's face softened at the memory. "I did. Albert was a good man but lonely. Widowed for many years. He worked his whole life on these lands, but never had children. He became more and more reclusive as time passed." "And what happened to him?" "He passed away about 5 years ago. Poor health, tired heart. In his last months, he kept saying that when he was gone, everything he had would go to whoever needed it. He said that land without people to care for it was just sadness." Dorothy felt a shiver. They were the same words from the letter. "Did he ever formalize this in any way?" "Not that I know of. Albert didn't like paperwork lawyers. He said an honest man's word was worth more than a signed paper." Gladys looked at Dorothy with curiosity. "Why do you ask?" Dorothy hesitated. Michael had told her not to tell anyone, but something about this woman inspired trust. And she needed witnesses. "I found a letter from him. Documents, deeds to several lands around here." Gladys's eyes widened. "Where?" "Hidden on the property. He wrote that he wanted it to go to whoever had the courage to rebuild the place." The older woman fell silent for a long moment, processing the information. "This would change many things, my dear. These lands, if they're what I'm thinking, are worth a lot of money. For years, a construction company has been trying to buy this entire region. They want to build a big development. But without being able to buy Albert's property, which is the largest and most central, they can't do anything. A construction company? Which one? I don't remember the exact name, but their representative came by here several times. A tall man, well-dressed, gold ring on his finger. Dorothy's blood ran cold. This man, was his name Richard? No, the name was different. Ronald? Ryan? I'm not sure. But the description... Gladys paused, making the connection. My God, you think it's the same person? I'm sure. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Richard, or whatever his real name was, wasn't just pulling random scams. There was a bigger plan. He wanted to remove anyone who could legitimize the property's ownership, keeping it in legal limbo until the construction company found a way to buy it. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Dorothy returned home with her head buzzing with information. Michael was waiting anxiously for her, having spent the day trying to make basic repairs to the roof. When she told him everything Gladys had revealed, he stopped working and sat down beside her. This is bigger than we imagined. If there's a construction company involved, there's a lot of money at stake. What do we do? We need to be careful. Very careful. If they find out about the documents before we're ready, they might try something drastic. Drastic like what? Michael didn't answer immediately, but his silence said it all. Dorothy swallowed hard. She had gotten into something much bigger than a simple scam. This was a conspiracy involving land, money, and powerful people. That same afternoon, while they were working on the house, a car stopped in front of the property. Dorothy felt her stomach clench when she recognized the driver. It was Richard Blackwell with his impeccable suit and fake smile. "Mrs. Wilson, what a surprise to find you here," he said, getting out of the car with the ease of someone who had nothing to fear. She climbed down from the small ladder where she was cleaning a window and walked towards him, each step heavy with contained anger. "Surprise? You sold me this house, or did you forget?" "Oh, of course, of course. I just came by to check if everything was okay. I see the house needs some repairs, but nothing that takes away its charm, right?" Dorothy wanted to scream. She wanted to lunge at him and wipe that smile off his face, but she forced herself to stay calm. If he was there, he had an agenda. "Charm, this house is falling apart. The photos you showed me were completely different." Richard made a face of fake concern. "Really? How strange. Maybe I got it mixed up with another property. You know how it is, we deal with so many properties." He looked around, his eyes stopping for a moment on Michael, who was watching from a distance. "But I came with a proposal that might help." "Proposal? I see you're having difficulties with the property. That's perfectly understandable. Maintaining the property requires resources, and I know retirement isn't always enough. So I have a client interested in buying the land. For a fair price, of course." Dorothy almost laughed at the man's audacity. "You sell me a house for one price and now you want to buy it back? For how much?" Richard took a piece of paper from his suit jacket's inner pocket. $15,000. Cash. It was less than a third of what she had paid. Dorothy felt bile rise in her throat. "Get off my property. Now." Richard's smile didn't waver, but something changed in his eyes. They became colder, more calculating. "Mrs. Wilson, be sensible. I don't see how you'll be able to make this place livable. And even if you do, the legal costs to sort out the paperwork will be very high. I'm offering a dignified way out." "I said get out." Michael approached, standing beside Dorothy. Richard looked him over with a scornful look. "And who are you, the husband?" "I'm the one who will make sure she doesn't get cheated again." Richard shrugged, heading back to his car. "The offer stands for 2 days. After that, the price drops by half. Think it over." The car drove off, kicking up dust, leaving Dorothy trembling with anger and fear. "He knows," she said. "Somehow he knows about the documents." "Not necessarily. He might just be trying to pressure you into selling cheap. But I agree we need to act fast." That night, Michael slipped out secretly to meet his lawyer friend. Dorothy was left alone in the house, every creak of the wood making her heart jump. She lit several candles throughout the living room and sat with a kitchen knife beside her, in case she needed to defend herself. The hours dragged on. Michael returned just before dawn, bringing mixed news. Andrew, the lawyer, confirmed that the documents appeared legitimate, but the process to validate them would be complex and time-consuming. More importantly, he had revealed something crucial. The construction company behind the entire scheme was Mitchell & Sons, one of the largest in the region, known for questionable methods but always managing to escape lawsuits. Andrew said he knows other lawyers who have faced this construction company. They have an entire office dedicated to acquiring land by any means necessary, legal or not. And what does he think we should do? We need more evidence, more witnesses, and we need to officially register our claim to the land before they make any legal moves of their own. How do we register if we don't know if the documents are valid? Andrew will help us, but he said it will take time. And he asked for one thing, that I testify against my former creditors in a case he's handling. In return, he defends us without charging. Dorothy realized the weight of that decision. Michael would have to expose himself, come out of the shadows where he had been hiding for months. You don't have to do this for me. Yes, I do. For you, for me, and for all the other people who were deceived. I'm tired of running, Dorothy. Maybe it's time to face what I left behind. The following days were intense. While Michael worked on repairs around the house, Dorothy visited other neighbors, hearing stories about Albert Thompson. Each conversation added a layer to the portrait of a lonely but generous man who helped those in need and dreamed that his land would be useful after his passing. She met Mr. Donald, an 80-year-old man who had been Albert's friend for decades. He confirmed that the deceased neighbor had always expressed the desire to leave everything to whoever would take care of the place. Moreover, Donald had letters exchanged with Albert where he mentioned this intention in writing. I keep these letters as a keepsake. Albert was like a brother to me. If you're really going to try to honor his wish, these letters are yours. With each witness, with each piece of evidence collected, Dorothy felt the weight of responsibility grow. It was no longer just about recovering her money. It was about honoring the memory of a good man and preventing others from being deceived. A week after Richard's visit, another car stopped in front of the house. This time it wasn't the broker, but a woman around 40 years old, dressed formally and carrying a document folder. Dorothy was on the porch, painting the boards Michael had repaired, when the woman approached. Good afternoon, I'm looking for Mrs. Dorothy Wilson. That's me. My name is Barbara Mitchell. I represent Mitchell & Sons Construction. Can we talk? Dorothy stepped down from the porch, wiping her hands on her pants. So this was her, part of the family behind it all. She decided to play along. Of course. About what? About this property. I understand that Mr. Richard Blackwell made an offer that you refused. I'm here to present a better proposal. Better how? Barbara opened the folder and showed a document. $50,000. Well above what you paid for the property. It was truly a significant amount, more than Dorothy would earn in years of retirement. But it also confirmed her suspicions that land was worth much more than they were offering. And why is your construction company so interested in this specific piece of land? Honestly, because it's the key piece for a larger project. We have purchase options on all the surrounding properties, but without this one central to all the others, the project cannot move forward. Then it's worth much more than $50,000. Barbara smiled, impressed. It is. But $50,000 is what we're willing to pay. And if I refuse, then we both lose. Your land remains worth little without the context of the larger development, and our project becomes unfeasible. She paused. But I know there are legal complications with your deed. We can resolve that too. We have excellent lawyers. Interesting that you mentioned legal complications when it was people from your company who sold me this house with fake documents. Barbara's smile vanished. I don't know what you're talking about. We never hire independent agents for these transactions. Doesn't Richard Blackwell work for you? I've never heard that name. Dorothy realized that either Barbara was a very good actress or she really didn't know about Richard's activities. There were more layers to that situation than she had imagined. I'll think about your offer, but I'm not promising anything. You have 1 week. After that, the offer drops to $30,000. After Barbara left, Dorothy rushed to tell Michael. They spent hours debating what that conversation meant. If Richard really didn't work for the construction company, who was behind him? And why run scams using the name of a company that was making legitimate offers? The answer came unexpectedly. Gladys appeared at the house the next morning, agitated and worried. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something. Last night, Richard showed up at my house." "What? What did he want?" "Money. He said he knew I had talked to you, and that if I didn't pay $5,000, he would tell everyone I was his accomplice in the scams." "But that's a lie." "I know, but he has photos of me talking to him months ago when he first showed up around here. He says he'll use them to incriminate me." Michael clenched his fists. He's desperate. He knows he's losing control of the situation. "There's more," continued Gladys. "He mentioned he has someone important protecting him. Someone at City Hall who alters documents and facilitates the frauds." The pieces finally fell into place. Richard was just the tip of a larger scheme involving corruption at City Hall and land exploitation, and now he was resorting to extortion to keep his victims quiet. "We won't let this happen," said Dorothy, her voice firm. "We'll gather all the victims, all the evidence, and we'll put an end to this." The plan was set in motion. During the following week, Dorothy and Gladys visited every person who had been deceived by Richard. They found 7 victims in total, including the retired couple and the widowed gentleman. Each had a similar story: fake photos, documents that looked legitimate, lost money. Michael, meanwhile, worked with Andrew to organize all the documentation. The lawyer discovered that the documents found in the box were genuine, and that, with the witnesses they had gathered about Albert Thompson's intentions, they had a strong case to validate Dorothy's ownership of the lands. But there was one obstacle. They needed to identify who at City Hall was helping Richard. Without that, he would continue running scams with impunity. The answer came from an unexpected source. A young man in his 20s showed up at the house one morning, nervous and constantly looking around. He said his name was Brandon, and that he had worked as Richard's assistant for a few months. "I didn't know it was a scam at first. I thought it was normal real estate business, but when I realized I was already in too deep." Brandon took a flash drive from his pocket. "This has everything: recorded conversations, forged documents, even the names of the people at City Hall who help." "Why are you doing this?" asked Michael, suspicious. "Because I can't sleep at night anymore, and because my grandmother almost fell for a similar scam. When I found out you were gathering victims, I decided it was time to do the right thing." The flash drive was given to Andrew, who could hardly believe what he found. There was enough evidence to incriminate not only Richard, but also 3 City Hall employees and even a building inspector, who turned a blind eye to irregularities in exchange for bribes. "With this we can go to the press," said Andrew. "Put public pressure on them. But it's also dangerous. These people will realize they're cornered and might react badly." "I don't care," replied Dorothy. "I've suffered enough. I won't let them do this to anyone else." The story came out in the local newspaper 2 weeks later. The headline read, "Corruption Scheme and Real Estate Scams Exposed." The article detailed every aspect of the fraud, mentioned the names of those involved, and included testimonies from the victims. The impact was immediate. Richard tried to flee the city, but was arrested before reaching the state border. The corrupt City Hall employees were suspended and began facing legal proceedings. The victims, including Dorothy, filed lawsuits to recover their losses. But the legal battle to validate the deeds would still take months. Meanwhile, Dorothy and Michael turned the house into a real home. Every repaired floorboard, every painted wall, every restored window was a small victory against everything they had faced. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The news of the dismantled scheme brought unexpected consequences. 3 months after the report, Emily, Dorothy's daughter, showed up at the property. Dorothy was in the garden, planting tomato seedlings that Gladys had given her, when she heard the familiar voice. "Mom?" She turned around, dirty with soil, sweaty under the hot sun, and saw Emily standing at the gate, an expression of shock on her face. Next to her was a man in a dark suit with a briefcase. "Emily, what are you doing here?" Her daughter entered slowly, observing the house that was now almost unrecognizable. The repaired roof, the plastered walls painted light yellow, the windows with new glass. It wasn't perfect, but it was decent. I saw the report. Why didn't you tell me what you were going through? Dorothy wiped her hands on her pants, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Because you always said I would fall for some scam. I didn't want to hear, "I told you so." Mum, I would never... Emily paused, swallowing her words. They both knew that's exactly what she would have said. "I'm sorry, I came as soon as I found out, and I brought someone who can help." The man in the suit introduced himself as Dr. Samuel, a lawyer specializing in property law. Emily had hired his services to help her mother. "You don't need to, dear. I already have a lawyer." "I know you do. I read about Andrew Morgan in the report. He's good, but my friend Samuel is an expert exactly in this type of case. They can work together." Michael appeared in the doorway of the house at that moment, and Dorothy saw Emily's expression harden upon seeing him. She recognized that look. Her daughter had jumped to conclusions. "Who is he?" "Michael Carpenter. He's helping me renovate the house." "Helping? How?" "Are you paying him?" "That's none of your business." "Yes, it is. You were tricked once. How do you know he isn't taking advantage of you, too?" Michael took a step back, visibly uncomfortable. Dorothy felt anger rising. "Emily, you don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, I do. I know you're here, isolated with a stranger, in a house that might not even be truly yours. Mom, you need to come back to New York City. We sell this property, recover what we can, and you come back home. This is my home now." "This place?" Emily pointed around with disdain. "This is a disaster, Mom. You're 70 years old. You shouldn't be carrying lumber and planting gardens. You should be resting, enjoying life." "I am enjoying it. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm truly living, not just existing." The silence that followed was sharp. Dr. Samuel cleared his throat, embarrassed by the familiar scene. "Ladies, perhaps it's best if I come back another day to discuss the legal aspects." "No," said Dorothy, recomposing herself. "Stay. Let's talk about the documents. But I'll make it clear. I'm not selling this land, and I'm not going back to New York City." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but something in her mother's posture made her hesitate. There was a firmness there that she hadn't seen in a long time, perhaps years. The Dorothy she knew was always a bit insecure, always seeking approval, always giving in. This woman with a straight back and determined gaze was different. The meeting with Dr. Samuel brought good news. With the evidence gathered and the scandal exposed, the process of validating the deeds was progressing well. Even more other properties mentioned in Albert's documents were being verified. If everything was confirmed, Dorothy would own almost 10 hectares of land, including areas with significant commercial potential. "The construction company Mitchell & Sons has renewed their offer," informed Dr. Samuel. 70,000 rials for the central property and 30,000 more for usage rights to the adjacent areas. 100,000 rials? Emily took a deep breath. "Mum, with that money you could buy a great apartment in New York City and still have enough left to live comfortably." "I don't want an apartment in New York City." "But, Mum—" "I said no, Emily." Michael, who had remained silent during the whole discussion, finally spoke. "With your permission, may I offer a suggestion?" Emily looked at him coldly, but Dorothy nodded for him to continue. "What if instead of selling, you developed the land? There's enough space for several things, a small inn, an event space, even smaller lots for partial sale. That would generate steady income instead of a one-time payment." "And you would be the manager of this whole venture, I suppose," said Emily sarcastically. "Emily!" Dorothy was red with anger. "Michael doesn't deserve that treatment. He was here when you weren't, when I was alone and desperate." "And why was he here, Mom? What's his real story? Why is a 40-year-old man living hidden in a stranger's attic?" Michael took a deep breath and faced Emily. "Because I lost everything. My company went bankrupt. I was full of debt, and I needed to disappear for a while I sorted things out. Your mother gave me a chance when I had nothing. In return, I helped rebuild this house. There's nothing sinister about it. Convenient. And now that the house could be worth a lot of money, you're still here." "Emily, that's enough." Dorothy stepped between them. "You will respect Michael or you will leave. The choice is yours." The daughter looked at her mother with a mix of disbelief and hurt. "You're choosing a stranger over your own daughter?" "I'm choosing someone who trusted me when you doubted every decision I made. I'm choosing someone who saw me as an equal, not as a poor thing who needs to be protected from herself." Tears began to stream down Emily's face. Dr. Samuel took the moment to discreetly say goodbye, leaving the documents on the table and promising to return the following week. When he left, Dorothy sat down heavily on the sofa that Michael had restored. Emily remained standing, trying to control her crying. "Mom, I just want to protect you." "I know, daughter, but I don't need protection. I need respect. Respect for my choices, even when you don't agree with them. And if those choices are wrong, then they'll be my mistakes, and I'll deal with the consequences. But know that for the first time in a long while, I don't feel like I'm making a mistake. I feel like I'm finally living." Emily finally sat down beside her mother, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "How did we get here? When did we grow so far apart?" "I think it was gradual. After your father left, I became so focused on providing for you, on making sure you lacked nothing, that I forgot to live my own life. And you grew up seeing that, thinking that was how I should be. But I just wanted you to rest, to enjoy your retirement. And I am enjoying it, Emily, in my own way, with soil on my hands, sun on my face, and a purpose beyond just waiting for time to pass." They stayed silent for a while, side by side, breathing in the same room that months ago was just ruins and lost hopes. "Tell me everything," Emily finally asked, "from the beginning." And Dorothy told her, every detail, every fear, every small victory. She talked about meeting Michael, about discovering the documents, about facing Richard and gathering the victims. Emily listened without interrupting, and when her mother finished, there was understanding in her eyes. "You really were reborn here, weren't you?" "I was reborn, yes." "And Michael?" The question came in a softer tone. "Is there something between you?" Dorothy laughed, surprised by the question. "Not in the way you're thinking. Michael is a good man, and he's become a true friend. But there's no romance, if that's what you're asking. Just two lost people who found each other and decided to help one another." "And his idea to develop the land? It makes sense, don't you think? I have all this space, and there's demand for inns in the area. Gladys told me tourists pass through here on their way to nearby historic towns, but there's nowhere to stay. We could meet that need." Emily bit her lip, thoughtful. "You'd need capital for that. Renovations, permits, furniture, advertising." "I know. But some of the money from the lawsuits against the scammers should eventually come back, and maybe we can get a loan using the land as collateral. Or," Emily hesitated, "I could invest." Dorothy turned to look at her daughter. "What?" "I have some savings, not much, but enough to get started, and I have management experience. I've worked in hospitality for years. I could help set up the business, do things right." "Emily, you don't have to." "I want to. Not as a way to control you, but as a partnership. You have the land and the vision. I have the technical knowledge and resources. Michael has the handyman skills and can continue with the renovations. Together, maybe we can create something special." Dorothy felt tears threatening to well up. It was more than she had hoped for, more than she had dared to dream. Not just recovering her losses, but a chance to build a legacy, together with her daughter. Michael appeared in the doorway at that moment, clearly having given space for the mother-daughter conversation. Emily stood up and walked over to him, extending her hand. "I apologize for my earlier words. I was being overprotective and judging unfairly." He shook her hand, a relieved smile on his face. "No need to apologize. You were just looking out for your mother." "I admire that. So about this inn, do you have any plans in mind?" The three spent the rest of the day sketching out plans. Michael drew basic designs of how they could expand the existing building, using the old structure but adding new wings. Emily did cost calculations and profit projections. Dorothy contributed ideas about the atmosphere she wanted to create. Welcoming, simple, a place where people would feel at home. When the sun began to set, tinting the sky orange and pink, the three were on the porch looking at the land with different eyes. They no longer saw ruins and weeds, but possibilities and a future. "You know what I find most amazing?" Dorothy said softly. "Albert Thompson wanted someone to give new life to this place, and that's exactly what we're doing." "Do you think he would be happy?" asked Michael. "I'm sure. Gladys told me he dreamed of seeing these lands full of life and laughter again. An inn would bring exactly that." In the following months, the work was intense but rewarding. Emily returned to New York City, only to resign from her job and organize her move. She rented a small house near the property, keeping her independence but being close by to help with the project. The legal process continued its course. Dr. Samuel and Andrew worked together, combining expertise and building a solid case. The deeds were validated, confirming Dorothy Wilson as the legitimate owner of the lands that Albert Thompson had left. The news brought a new wave of media attention, painting Dorothy as a symbol of perseverance against adversity. But not everything was smooth sailing. Michael's creditors finally found him. One afternoon, two men showed up at the property demanding payment of old debts. Michael tried to negotiate, but they weren't interested in talking. They wanted the money, or they would take something of equivalent value. Dorothy watched the scene from the porch, and for the first time saw Michael truly defeated. He had rebuilt his confidence over the months, but those men brought back the shame and despair he had tried to leave behind. "How much does he owe?" asked Dorothy, when the men finally left, giving Michael a week to get the money. $23,000. With interest and penalties, it grew a lot. "I'll pay it." "No, you can't do that. You've already done too much for me." "Michael, you saved this house. You saved me. Let me return the favor." "It's not a favor if it's a debt. I'll find a way to earn that money." "How? In a week?" He had no answer. Dorothy made the decision on her own. She sold 3 small plots on the edges of the property to neighboring farmers. The money was enough to pay off Michael's debt, and there was still some left to invest in the renovations. When she told him what she had done, Michael was initially furious. "You had no right. Those lands were yours, and I chose to use them to help a friend, just as Albert would have done." The comparison silenced him. Michael knew she was right. That was exactly the spirit that Albert Thompson cultivated, using what you have to help those in need. "How will I pay you back?" "You won't. This wasn't a loan, it was a gift. But if you want to repay me, agree to become a partner in the inn. 1/3 for me, 1/3 for Emily, 1/3 for you. Real partners." Michael was speechless. Tears streamed down his face, tears of gratitude and relief. For the first time in years, he was no longer just the man who had lost everything. He was someone with purpose again, with a future ahead of him. The construction of the inn took 8 months. Every wall raised, every finished room was a celebration. Gladys and other neighbors often came by to help or just watch the progress. The entire community was invested in the success of that project. When it was time to choose a name, Dorothy had no doubts. Albert Thompson Inn. It was a way to keep alive the memory of the man who made it all possible. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after Dorothy had stepped off that bus and found her hopes crushed. But now, looking at the transformed property, it was hard to believe it was the same place. The main house had been expanded to include 6 comfortable rooms, each decorated with simplicity but charm. The porch that was once falling apart was now wide and welcoming, with rocking chairs and a wonderful view of the sunset. The gardens were in full bloom, the vegetable patch was producing, and there was even a small outdoor seating area where they would serve breakfast. Over 50 people showed up for the opening. Neighbors, victims of Richard Blackwell's scheme who had been partially reimbursed, journalists, and even Barbara Mitchell from the construction company, who surprisingly brought flowers and congratulations. "I admit I underestimated your determination," Barbara said to Dorothy. "Our offer still stands, but I honestly hope you don't accept it. What you've created here is special." Dorothy thanked her, but both knew the answer was no. That place was no longer just land. It was home. During the event, Dorothy stepped onto a small makeshift platform to give a speech. She looked at the crowd. saw Emily next to Michael, saw Gladys and Donald smiling, saw Dr. Samuel and Andrew chatting animatedly, and felt her heart overflow. A year ago I arrived here with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. I was deceived, robbed, left in ruins, and yet it was here, in this place that seemed to be my greatest defeat, that I found my greatest victory. She paused, emotional. I learned that starting over has no age limit, that trust can be rebuilt, that kindness still exists, even when all seems lost. And I learned that sometimes what we think is the end is just the beginning of something much better. The applause was warm and heartfelt. Dorothy stepped down from the platform and was hugged by Emily, who whispered in her mother's ear, "I'm so proud of you." The inn was an immediate success. Reservations started coming in even before the official opening, driven by Dorothy's story of overcoming adversity that had spread throughout the region. People came not just for the accommodation, but to meet the woman who turned disaster into triumph. But the true reward came 3 months after the opening. Dorothy was in the garden, watering the plants, when an unfamiliar car pulled up in front. A woman about 65 years old got out, looking around with a wondrous expression. "Excuse me, are you the owner, Dorothy?" "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" The woman approached, her eyes glistening with held-back tears. "My name is Helen. My brother was Albert Thompson." Dorothy's world stopped for a moment. "Your brother?" But we were told he had no family. We had grown apart, over silly reasons like most family quarrels. By the time I found out he had passed, it was too late. I went to his old address, but they told me the property had been sold. It took me months to track down what happened. Helen looked around, seeing the inn, the gardens, the life Dorothy had created there. "And then I read about you in the papers, about how you found the documents, about the letter he left. I needed to see it with my own eyes." "I'm sorry for your loss," Dorothy said gently. "Your brother was clearly a special man." He was. Stubborn, lonely, but with a huge heart. Helen wiped away a tear. "I came here prepared to be angry, to feel like I'd lost something that was rightfully mine. But looking at all this, seeing what you've built, I know Albert would have been happy. He always wanted these lands to bring joy, not loneliness. Would you like to come in? I can show you around, tell you stories the neighbors shared about him." Helen agreed, and the two spent hours talking. Albert's sister filled in gaps in his history, explaining about the wife he lost young, about the dreams of having children that never came true, about how he poured all his love into that land because he had no one else to love. "He wrote me a letter a few months before he passed," Helen revealed. "He said he was making arrangements for when he was gone, that he wanted to make sure something good came from his solitude. I thought they were the delusions of a sick man, but now I see he truly had a plan." Before leaving, Helen took a wooden box from the car. "These are his things. Photos, some letters, personal items. I thought you should have them to place in the inn, so people can know the man behind the name." Dorothy Wilson accepted the box with reverence. That night she, Michael and Emily opened it together and explored Albert's memories. There were photos of him young and strong, working the land, photos with his wife, the love evident in every image. Letters exchanged with friends over the years, always kind, always offering help. "Let's create a small memorial," suggested Emily. "In the inn's lobby. People should know the full story." And so they did. A corner of the common area was dedicated to Albert Thompson, with framed photos, the original letter he had left, and a text recounting his life and legacy. Guests often stopped to read, many leaving with tears in their eyes and renewed faith in human kindness. The months turned into years. The Albert Thompson Inn became a reference in the region, not only for the quality of service, but for the story it carried. Dorothy, now 72 years old, still worked actively, welcoming guests with a warm smile and stories to share. Michael married a local teacher, Julie, who fell in love with the inn and his redemption story. He remained a partner and was responsible for all maintenance, but now he had a life of his own, a growing family. His woodworking resurfaced as a hobby, and he created unique pieces to decorate the inn. Emily found peace away from the hustle of New York City. She managed the business side efficiently, but had also learned to slow down, to appreciate the simple things. She started painting in her spare time, creating paintings that adorned the inn's rooms. Gladys and Donald became constant presences, often dining with Dorothy and sharing stories of the old days. The entire community prospered with the inn's success, which brought tourists and activity to the region. As for Richard Blackwell and his accomplices, they faced justice. Convicted of fraud, corruption, and extortion, they would spend years paying for their crimes. More importantly, the recovered money was partially returned to the victims, bringing some financial relief and, more crucially, a sense of justice served. One summer afternoon, almost 3 years after the opening, Dorothy was sitting on the porch watching new guests arrive. It was an elderly couple, looking tired from the journey. The woman looked around with wide eyes, clearly impressed. Dorothy stood up to welcome them personally, as she always did. "Welcome to the Albert Thompson Inn. My name is Dorothy." "We read about this place," said the woman. "About your story, about how you were deceived and yet built all this. It's true, it was a difficult path, but worth every moment." The husband cleared his throat, clearly emotional. "We came because, well, we went through something similar. We lost our savings in a different scam. We're still processing everything, trying to rebuild. When we read about you, about this place, we felt we needed to come." Dorothy understood immediately. She saw in their eyes the same despair she had felt that first night, alone in a ruined house. Gently, she took the woman's hand. "You will be okay. I know it seems impossible now, but I promise you will find your way back. And while you're here, consider this place a refuge, a space to begin healing." The couple stayed for a week. During that time, Dorothy shared her full story with them, not just the triumphs, but also the moments of doubt, the fear, the nights crying alone. She was honest about how close she had come to giving up, and about how every small step forward eventually became a complete journey. When they left, they posted an online review that went viral. "More than an inn, this is a place of hope. If you are lost, if you have been deceived, if you feel your life is over, come here. Meet Mrs. Dorothy Wilson. See with your own eyes that starting over is possible, at any age." The review brought a new wave of guests, many of them older people seeking inspiration and renewal. The inn became a symbol, a beacon for those who had lost their way. And Dorothy embraced that role with all her soul. She began giving small talks on weekends, always informal, just sharing her experience and listening to others' stories. These gatherings became so popular that they had to create a larger space to accommodate everyone interested. Michael built a small outdoor auditorium, using reclaimed wood from old buildings in the area. It could seat about 50 people and was under a large mango tree that provided natural shade. There, every Saturday afternoon, Dorothy spoke about resilience, about trusting again after being deceived, about finding purpose in adversity. "The biggest blow wasn't the money they stole from me," she often said. "It was almost having my faith in humanity stolen, in my own ability to judge. Getting that back was more valuable than any property." One of those afternoons, a young woman of about 30 raised her hand to ask a question. "How did you know when to trust again? How did you tell Michael who was honest from Richard, who was a con man?" It was a question Dorothy had been asked many times, and she never had an easy answer. "Honestly? At first I didn't know. I was afraid of Michael, I distrusted him, but I watched his actions, not just his words. I saw how he worked without expecting anything in return, how he respected my boundaries, how he was transparent about his past. Con men are good with words, but actions don't lie in the long run. And if you had been wrong, if he had been another con man, then I would have dealt with it when it happened. We can't live paralyzed by the fear of what could go wrong. Sometimes we need to take a risk to have a chance for something to go right." The words resonated throughout the auditorium. Many people there had been deceived in some way, and the scar of trauma kept them from moving forward. Hearing Dorothy speak with such wisdom and yet such humility was comforting. After the talk, a lady of about 80 approached. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, but her eyes had a determined gleam. "Mrs. Dorothy Wilson, I have a different question. Not about being deceived, but about starting over. I'm 82 years old. Do you think there is still time for me?" Dorothy looked at that woman, saw the vulnerability and hope mixed in her expression, and felt a deep connection. When I was 70, I thought my life was basically over, that all I had left was to sit and wait. Now, at 72, I know I was terribly wrong. As long as we are breathing, there is time. To grow, to change, to start over. But I am so old. And I was too old to start a business, to renovate a house falling apart, to confront con men. Too old according to whom? Age is just a number. What matters is the fire that still burns inside you. The woman began to cry, tears of relief and liberation rolling down her wrinkled face. Dorothy hugged her, two women of similar generations, both proving that life doesn't end when society says it should. That night, Dorothy was in her private room, a simple but comfortable area they had built for her on the second floor of the main house. She looked out the window at the moonlit property, still hardly believing it was all real. Emily knocked on the door and entered, carrying 2 cups of tea. "I brought company and a hot drink." "Thank you, dear." They sat together near the window, in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Mom, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course." "Do you regret anything?" Trusting Richard coming here, Dorothy thought carefully before answering. "Do I regret being deceived? Yes and no. Yes, because it was painful, because it could have been avoided with more caution. No, because it brought me where I needed to be. If I hadn't been deceived, I never would have come here, never would have met Michael, never would have built all this. Sometimes our worst moments lead us to our best destinations." "That's very philosophical for almost midnight," Emily laughed softly. "It's the wisdom that comes with age and experience," Dorothy joked back. "Speaking of wisdom, today's meeting was special. The way you spoke with that elderly lady was beautiful. She reminded me of myself, so lost, so convinced it was too late. I hope my words help her find her own journey." Emily took a sip of tea, then said gently, "You know, I've learned a lot too. About letting go of control, about trusting others' choices, about not underestimating people because of age or circumstances. You taught me all that, Mum, and I'm a better person because of it." Dorothy reached for her daughter's hand and squeezed it affectionately. "We've both grown. That's the beauty of true relationships. It's not a one-way street." The years kept passing, each bringing new challenges and new joys. The inn needed expansions to accommodate the growing demand. Michael hired some assistants to help with maintenance, young people from the area who learned carpentry and construction from him, perpetuating skills that might have been lost. Gladys eventually became ill and needed constant care. Dorothy insisted she move into a special room at the inn, adapted for her needs. The neighbor who had given the first information about Albert Thompson spent her last years surrounded by affection and care, never alone. "You didn't have to do this," Gladys said one morning, as Dorothy helped her get dressed. "Of course I did. You were one of the first to believe in me, to help me when I had nothing. That's not forgotten. But I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did. You gave me information, context, hope. Without you, I might never have discovered the truth about everything." Gladys held Dorothy's hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "You know what I admire most about you? It's not that you overcame the scam or built this inn. It's that you never let the cruelty you suffered turn you into a bitter person. You stayed kind. You kept trusting. That's rare. I'm not perfect, Gladys. I have my moments of anger, of distrust. But you don't let those moments define you. That's the difference." The conversation stayed with Dorothy. It was true she had made a conscious choice not to let Richard's betrayal change her. It would have been easy to close her heart, to see enemies around every corner. But what kind of life would that be? Donald, now 85 years old, still visited regularly, always with stories about Albert Thompson to share. He had become a kind of unofficial historian of the inn, enchanting guests with tales of the old days. One afternoon, he arrived with a box of old photographs. "I found a few more pictures of Albert. I thought you might like to have them." Among the photos, there was one particularly touching, Albert standing exactly where the inn now stood, tools in hand, a smile on his face. Behind him, a hand-painted sign. "One day, this will be a home for many." Dorothy looked at the photo with tears in her eyes. He already knew. From the beginning, he envisioned exactly this. Albert was a visionary. He just didn't have the luck to see his vision come true. But you did it for him. The photo was framed and placed in a prominent position in Albert's memorial. It became one of the most talked about images by the guests, the visual evidence that dreams can come true, even if it takes decades and different people to make them happen. On the inn's 5th anniversary, they organized a big celebration. They invited everyone who had been part of the journey. Neighbors, former guests, journalists who covered the story, even Helen, Albert's sister, who had become a frequent visitor and dear friend. The party was simple but joyful, with abundant food prepared by local cooks, live music from regional guitarists, and many stories shared. Dorothy moved among the guests, thanking each one for their part in the story. When it was time for the speech, she climbed onto the small platform again, looking at the familiar and beloved faces around her. 5 years ago, I was a lost woman, deceived and without hope. Today, I'm surrounded by friends, family, and a purpose that makes me wake up every day with joy. This transformation wasn't my doing alone. It was all of you. Everyone who believed, who helped, who simply cared. And it's for you that this inn exists. Not as a monument to my success, but as a testament to what community, kindness, and perseverance can create. She paused, emotional, before continuing. Albert Thompson dreamed that these lands would bring joy. Look around, see the smiles, hear the laughter. He succeeded. His dream came true, and as long as I live, I'll make sure to honor that legacy every day. The applause was deafening. Many people had tears in their eyes, touched by Dorothy's sincerity and gratitude. When she stepped down from the platform, she was hugged by dozens of people, each wanting to express their own thanks. Later that night, when everyone had left and the inn was quiet, Dorothy did something she rarely did. She returned to the exact spot where she had spent that first terrible night. The room that was once just ruins was now a cozy common area, but she could still remember every detail of that night. Michael found her there, lost in thought. Is everything okay? I'm great, just remembering. The first night. Yes, how desperate I was, how you came down from that trap door and I thought my situation couldn't get worse. Michael laughed. And look where we are now. Exactly. She looked around. Did you know it would work out? From the beginning? Honestly, no. In the first days, I thought you would give up and go back to New York City. I thought it was just another impossible dream. What changed? I saw your determination. The way you wouldn't accept defeat, how you kept getting up every time you were knocked down. And I realized that if you believed so much, I should believe too. Dorothy smiled, remembering those difficult but foundational days. We saved each other, didn't we? You gave me the practical skills I needed, and I gave you a purpose again. More than that, you gave me faith. Faith in myself, faith in people, faith in the future. I was so lost, Dorothy, so convinced that I had ruined my life beyond repair. You showed me that nothing is beyond repair as long as we're still willing to try. They stood in silence for a moment, united by the shared journey. Michael, I never said this properly, but thank you. For staying, for believing, for becoming the family I didn't know I needed. The pleasure was all mine, and the gratitude is mutual. The following years solidified the inn as a regional institution. Awards were won, not for luxury or ostentation, but for the human impact they created. Several travel magazines highlighted the place, always focusing on the story behind the walls. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. A nearby university began using Dorothy Wilson's story as a case study in their entrepreneurship and management classes. Professors brought groups of students to visit the inn to hear firsthand how resilience and community could overcome almost any obstacle. Dorothy loved these visits. Seeing young people listening to her story, with eyes shining with inspiration, made her feel that everything had an even greater purpose than she had imagined. You are the future, she told the students, and I hope you take from this visit not just business techniques but values. That success isn't just about money, it's about impact. That age is never a barrier. that even our worst moments can be seeds for our greatest triumphs. A business administration student, after one of these talks, approached Dorothy. "My grandmother went through something similar. She was tricked in a scam, lost everything, but she gave up. She became bitter, reclusive. Seeing you here, having gone through a similar experience but with such a different outcome, makes me want to help her not to give up too." Dorothy took the young woman's hands. "Then do it. Show her this inn. Tell her my story. And tell her it's never too late to start again, nor to change the ending of our own story." The student returned months later with her grandmother. The 75-year-old woman was visibly withdrawn, carrying the weight of years of bitterness. But as she toured the inn, hearing the full story, something began to change in her expression. Dorothy spent an entire afternoon with her, sharing not only the successes but also the moments of doubt, the nights spent crying, the days wanting to give up. She was brutally honest about how difficult it was, and precisely because of that honesty her words had such an impact. "You chose to move forward," the woman said finally. "I chose to remain stuck in the past. It's never too late to make a different choice. I'm 75 years old, and I started this at 70. You have a 5-year head start." For the first time in a long time, the woman laughed. It was a rusty, seldom used sound, but genuine. She returned 6 months later, transformed. She had started a small homemade cake business, something she had always wanted to do but never had the courage. She brought a box of her best cakes as a gift for Dorothy. "You gave me something I thought I had lost forever," she said, tears streaming. "Hope. You always had it. You just needed a reminder." These moments, these human connections, were what truly mattered to Dorothy. The money the inn generated was good, the financial stability was important, but it was the possibility of touching lives that gave true meaning to everything. At 75, Dorothy remained active but began to delegate more. Emily took over the daily management, demonstrating skill and leadership that her mother deeply admired. Michael, now with 3 young children with Julie, was still responsible for maintenance, but also taught woodworking to local youth, his own legacy taking shape. One autumn morning, Dorothy woke up feeling something different. She wasn't sick, but there was a feeling of completeness, of a cycle closing. She went down to the kitchen and found Emily preparing breakfast for the guests. "Good morning, Mum. Did you sleep well?" "I did, and I had an interesting dream." "About what?" "About Albert. He was standing in that photo, the one that says, 'One day this will be home to many.' But when he turned around, it was no longer Albert. It was me." Emily stopped what she was doing and looked at her mother. "What do you think it means?" "I think it means I've done my part, that his dream became my dream, and now it's reality." Dorothy smiled softly. "And that maybe it's time to start thinking about the next chapter." "You're not thinking of selling, are you?" "No, of course not, but maybe it's time to officially pass the torch." "You're more than ready, Emily. This inn is as much yours as it is mine. More even, because you have more years ahead to make it grow." Emily approached and hugged her mother. "You're not going anywhere yet, Mum. We still need you here. And I'll be here, but perhaps in a different role, as the inn's grandma, the storyteller, letting you and Michael take the business forward." The transition was gradual and natural. Dorothy began dedicating more time to talks, conversations with guests, being the emotional heart of the inn, while others handled the daily operations. And she discovered she enjoyed this phase as much as the previous ones. Without the pressure of administrative responsibilities, she had time to write. She started a blog telling her story in detail, from that first terrible night to the present. The posts went viral, reaching people across the country who had been through similar situations. Publishers began reaching out, interested in turning the blog into a book. Dorothy hesitated initially, feeling her story was too simple, too common. But Emily convinced her otherwise. "Mom, your story is extraordinary precisely because it started so common. Anyone can be deceived, can lose everything. But not everyone finds the strength to rebuild. That's what needs to be shared." The book, titled Starting Over, A Story of Deception, Perseverance and Redemption, was published 2 years later. Dorothy was 77 when she held the first copy in her hands, hardly believing she had written a book. The launch was held naturally at the inn. Hundreds of people attended, including many who had been inspired by Dorothy's story over the years. Albert's sister Helen, now over 80, was in the front row. In the launch speech, Dorothy was characteristically humble. "This book isn't about me. It's about all of us who have fallen and had to decide whether to get up again. It's about community, about kindness, about not letting the worst of humanity stop us from seeing the best. If my story can encourage one person not to give up, then every word written was worth it." The book became a regional success, then a national one. Radio and television programs began inviting Dorothy for interviews. She always accepted, seeing each invitation as an opportunity to spread a message of hope and resilience. During a particularly emotional interview on a national television program, the host asked a question that took Dorothy by surprise. "Ms. Dorothy, if you could go back in time and avoid being deceived by Richard Blackwell, would you do it?" The audience fell silent, expecting the obvious answer. But Dorothy paused, really thinking about the question. "You know, years ago I would have said yes immediately, but today I'm not sure. That scam sent me on a journey that completely transformed my life. It made me stronger, wiser, more connected. It gave me a purpose I never had before. It brought Emily back close to me. It introduced me to Michael and so many other dear friends." She made an emotional pause. "I'm not saying scams are good, they're terrible and destructive, but I am saying that even from the worst experiences, we can draw something valuable, if we have the courage to look for it." The answer moved the host and many in the audience to tears. It was such a different, so redemptive perspective that it challenged the common narrative of victimization and bitterness. The impact of this interview was immense. In the following weeks, the inn received hundreds of reservation requests, so many that they had to create a waiting list. But more significant than the numbers were the letters that arrived, from people sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity, thanking Dorothy for giving voice to experiences that many felt ashamed to admit. One letter in particular touched her deeply. It was from a 50-year-old man who had lost everything in a financial scam and was contemplating giving up on life. Dorothy's story made him reconsider. "I realized that if a 70-year-old woman managed to start over after being deceived, I at 50 have no excuse. You saved me, Mrs. Wilson, literally saved me. And I promise I will honor this gift by rebuilding my life, just like you did." Dorothy personally replied to the letter, inviting the man to visit the inn when he felt ready. He showed up 3 months later, already visibly more recovered, with renewed plans and hopes. He stayed for a week, attending the talks, chatting with other guests, absorbing the energy of renewal that permeated the place. Before leaving, he sought out Dorothy. "I came here broken. I leave patched up, but in the process of healing. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me, just pay it forward. When you find someone lost like you were, extend a hand. That is the true legacy I want to leave, a chain of kindness and support that continues long after I'm gone." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you've been through or know someone who's been through a similar situation, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you believe Dorothy made the right decisions? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.